I found something really exciting. Hello plant pals and welcome to another video. My name is Kenna and I'm so excited to have you here with me today. Today we are going to be repotting some of my plants that are most in need, and that is going to be my Philodendron and Fuzzy Petiole, a few Hoya, and kind of anyone else that I see that probably needs an up pot. So I hope you guys enjoy. If you like this kind of video, go ahead and leave me a thumbs up. Give me a comment down below. Let me know what are some of the plants that you need to be repotting right now, and maybe put this video on pause, go and grab those plants and repot with me. I'd love to have you guys along for the ride. But I hope you guys enjoy, and let's get into the video. All right, so if you guys watched my most recent video, my houseplant tour for spring 2023, I did mention that this guy right here, my Fuzzy Petiole Philodendron, is pretty unhappy with me at the moment. I'm not sure exactly what is causing it. Originally, I thought that it might be part of the thrips issue, but since that issue has been, I don't want to say resolved, I need wood to knock on, but it's been at least reduced, and the plant is still having issues, I now have a couple other suspicions. The first is when a leaf gets caught coming out of the caterpillar like this one did. Usually one of the first thoughts is humidity. I did also set up a humidifier recently in my spring cleaning video, if you guys saw that, and it hasn't really helped. It hasn't put out a whole ton of new leaves since then, but I'm still seeing the same issues, and I was misting pretty regularly before that happened anyways. So my next suspicion is that it's going to be a nutrient deficiency. So I am going to, try to start boosting with maybe some CalMag for this plant in particular. However, in typical me fashion, because this plant is already unhappy, my first thought is, well, it's already angry, let's do something drastic. And I'm not necessarily recommending this as the best course of action for anyone, but I have been needing a plant to try out some experiments on, namely pon. So I did recently purchase some pon with the intention of trying on a few of my plants, and it's been sitting there and I haven't used it yet because I'm kind of worried about disrupting a perfectly happy plant and causing it possibly to be unhappy. This plant, however, is already unhappy, so my thought process is, well, it's not liking what I'm doing now, let's see what we can do differently. So this plant today with you guys is going to be my first pon experiment. I don't really have a lot of experience with passive semi-hydro or semi-hydro in general. Most of my experience is with plants in soil or perlites, really, on occasion. But I've been seeing a lot of kind of pon talk and pon videos lately, and a couple of my favorite creators here on YouTube, Unplant Parenthood and You Don't Even Grow Here, they use pon almost exclusively in a lot of their plants, and they're really, really happy. So I would kind of like to see what I can do to get my plants as happy as theirs. And looking at my collection, like I said, most of it is in soil. Ooh, those roots are coming right off. This plant does have some healthy roots, but a lot of them are pretty dry, which is odd because the soil was still moist. I'm wondering if this is like a dry rot issue. I didn't let this plant dry out, but it's kind of acting like I did. Interesting. Now this can happen if like the pot is too large for the plant and all the moisture reserves are at the bottom, but that pot should have been about the right size for this plant when it was switched over. So I'm a little curious. Maybe I did miss some watering, but I don't think I did. Usually I check with my moisture meter to make sure that a plant is ready to be watered. I'm just kind of pulling off the dry roots here because I don't want to pot dead roots or non-beneficial roots back in with this plant, because it's just kind of asking for a rot problem. But I am trying to massage as much soil kind of off these roots as I can. And if a few roots get broken in the process, it's not really that big a deal. That root just doesn't look happy to me. Okay. Anyways, but Unplant Parenthood and You Don't Even Grow Here both use pon in their collections pretty widely. A lot of their collections, especially like their Anthurium, are in pon. And I would like to kind of pop some of my Anthuriums in pon and see what they do, but I also am kind of nervous about upsetting them. My Anthurium are kind of my newest additions, if you want to say, and I'm really kind of still very fond of them, so I don't know that I'm willing to risk them just being popped right into pon and seeing what happens. So this plant I do really like, and I'm not saying that I do not by any means, but it also is already unhappy, so like I said, I'm a little bit more willing to see what I can do to get this plant happier than I am disturbing a perfectly happy plant. Actually, I think the vessel that I pulled out for this is going to end up being too big. All of this plant is coming out of this one little piece right there. This was obviously a plant grown in like a plug in a nursery, and that's kind of the compact soil that I'm teasing away down at the bottom here. It's very interesting. It looks like they probably grew this in like one of those biodegradable soil pods, which if you don't have any experience with, they can degrade over time, but they don't always go very quickly, which can lead to some problems. Namely, your roots will kind of get strangled by the pod at times if the growth outpaces the ability of the pod to decompose. And I've actually had that happen. My Philodendron, I want to say Red Sun, was a victim of that exact issue. And I couldn't figure out for the longest time what was wrong with that plant, because I was watering it and, it had, fairly healthy foliage. It was getting light, couldn't figure out what was going on, but none of the leaves were unfurling. Just gonna gesture at this plant here. Sorry about that. My boyfriend just got home with the corgi. He was at his annual vet visit, and unhappy little corgi mans. But anyways, so the leaves weren't unfurling. I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on with this plant, why it was so unhappy, until I finally dug it out of the pot and found that it was caught in a death plug, or one of those pods that just hadn't degraded over time. And I don't know, I know that they can be just fine, but I'm just not a fan of them. And every plant that I've had an issue with, like this similar issue with the leaves not unfurling, tends to have the same situation. So I am actually really happy that I'm getting this taken care of, but kind of bummed about, this compared to the pot that it was in. It was filling it out. There was roots coming out the bottom, but the roots just weren't happy and weren't healthy. So this is probably a good move today to get this out of this pot, out of this soil, and hopefully build some healthy root growth. There is a little bit of soil still clinging, but I don't want to break any roots. So I'm actually going to go ahead and rinse this off. I'll be back with you guys in just 1 minute. All right, so that was slightly more in-depth than I planned. I did get the roots pretty much all the way clean. There is a few little specks of dirt left over that are really stubborn and just do not want to come out of the roots here. However, when you're doing this kind of thing, when you're switching from a soil substrate or one substrate to a completely different substrate, it is really important to try to get as much of the soil off the roots as possible. And you can see here, mine are pretty clean. Like I said, they're not spotless by any means, but they are definitely a good deal less soil covered than they were previously. And I did also clean off while I was doing that a lot of the like dry roots or the rotting roots, just to make sure that I'm not kind of keeping the cycle of rot going. But when you're doing this kind of thing, the reason you're cleaning the roots so thoroughly is because you're going from one substrate to a completely different substrate. And most substrates, when you're planting, do not work the same way. So the way that pond wicks moisture is going to be different from the way that soil wicks moisture, or the way that sphagnum wicks moisture. It's all going to be different. So it's really important that you're not leaving a plant covered in soil that's going into pond that wicks moisture consistently and evenly, and the soil is going to remain wet. And you don't want to give that opportunity for those roots to rot in that wet soil. So that's why I was so careful about getting this taken care of. But now, I'm gonna move that all out of the way. And I have a ginormous bag of pond right here that I haven't used yet. And I think I'm gonna use this vessel. So I actually got this at the dollar store. The dollar store is one of my favorite places to find kind of planty items to be repurposed. And it's pretty tall, so I am gonna put a little leca layer at the bottom. I know not everyone does that. Some people, do passive semi-hydro in a pot with a reservoir. This is kind of gonna act the same way. I just have to be careful that, I'm not filling it up too far. But the purpose of the leca layer, like I said, is to give a little bit of space so I can use a little bit less of the pond, but also just so I can kind of have that water reservoir down at the bottom. And to me, it's just going to be really visible. And leca does wick pretty similarly to pond, because they're made of, like little leca clay beads, and the way that they wick water up through that clay is very similar. So it should be fine, and I've seen some people do it this way as well. So I think, yeah, that'll be about perfect actually. All right, so digging into my first bag of pond, I have a feeling I'm going to need scissors. Yes, I'm definitely gonna need scissors. Give me 1 second. I should really just start keeping scissors in my soil boxes and stuff. That way I don't have to leave and go grab them each and every time. Okay, so it's not a resealable situation, good to know. Guess I didn't need to cut off the handle then, that might bite me later. Cool, okay. So, like I said, I've never used pond before, but this is kind of what it looks like. I try to duck behind my hands here. It has, I'm making a ginormous mess, but it has zeolite, it has little fertilizer pellets, and it has just a few other ingredients that are going to help your plant both have aeration, and like I said, that wicking capability is going to keep them hydrated. But it's supposed to be really, really excellent for plants growing in hydro. And it's supposed to be great for reducing pests and just a lot of various other things. I think that's about the level I want that at. And I will say I am obviously not a pond expert. I haven't used it before, so I'm kind of getting my information from other sources, the web, other YouTubers, things like that. And I will say, if you want more information, I'm pretty sure both Unplanned Parenthood and You Don't Even Grow Here have some pond videos. And I think Oh, there's another YouTuber. I watched his video and I can't remember his name, but I'm gonna put it here on the screen for you guys. That way you can see who I'm talking about. And if you're looking for more information on pon, I would definitely recommend going to them, watching their videos. Since me being a pon noob, I mean, maybe don't trust everything that I'm saying, but this is just what I've learned from my research, my kind of journey into starting pon. All right. There we go. This is definitely gonna be steak, but this is my plant and pon. I am so excited. That looks so cool. All right, let me see if I can find. All right, got it. I wish I had thought of this. Oh, that actually goes into the pond quite easily. Okay. Perfect. Let me see. I know I had a couple extra Velcro loops. I try to save them when I take them off of plants. That way I can use them for just this reason. Okay. There we go. That looks a little bit better, a little bit more stable. I think that is pretty much it. So I am gonna go ahead and give this some water. I reuse old juice jugs for this because my water here is pretty hard, very chlorinated. So I let it sit out to kind of get a little bit of that chlorine to evaporate. Okay, I'm gonna give it maybe a little bit more. I have seen people say that pon kind of soaks up and distributes the water pretty evenly. So even if you give it a little bit more water than you think it needs, which is kind of where I'm at right now, I expect that it will kind of distribute throughout the plant. So that's what I've heard, that's my theory, but here we go. So now we're watered. I filled it up to about here, maybe a little bit above there. And like I said, I expect it to even out a little bit. I'm gonna keep a close eye on it though. And that is my first plant in pon. I do have an appointment to go to today, but I have a couple other plants that I did want to get repotted. Those are going to be a couple of my Hoya that have been brooding for a little too long. So I did want to get those done as well. I'll probably do those, however, when I get home, just because I don't want to cut too close to my appointment. So we'll cut to that. And no time has passed for you guys, but for me, it'll be about 3 hours. Right, I am back. That did not take me too terribly long, but we are ready to repot these cuties. If you watched my houseplant tour video, you definitely would have saw these guys, and they are pretty much begging at this point to be repotted, get moved out of these little cups. And today we are finally going to make that happen. This one, as I'm looking at it, is rooted, doesn't have a whole ton of roots, so we'll have to see what happens when we get in there. But, gotta put these out of the way so they don't fall over. They're rooted in stratum, and I do try to keep that separate, from the other mediums. Perfect. So let's go ahead and start with this little Shepherdii. This one is one of the ones that is very, very much outgrowing this little cup. And actually, let me get a bowl to keep this separate. All right, so there we go. I have Panera soup cups. I've been using them for a lot lately. But this one obviously is tendriling. It's looking for a place to go. I would say she's more than ready to be potted up. She's also actually put out a few new leaves now. trying to get these out of here without causing too much trouble. Let me maybe add a little bit of water in here will help. The Corey is down there. He's chasing reflections. He is such a little goofball. Man, this one just does not want to let go. I don't want to damage the new little leaves coming in, but okay. Let's see, maybe if I can loosen it up. There we go. That did it. Cool. Perfect. Just gonna tease a little bit off the roots. These roots are looking really, really good. Very nice and healthy. No, that one's fine. I was a little worried. It looks dark, but it's also in stratum, which colors them a little bit, just kind of with how dark it is. I'm maybe gonna rinse them off a little bit just to make sure, but I think they're fine. Oh yeah, they're just covered in stuff. Okay. Oh yeah, these roots are just fine. They have a little bit of algae on them just because they were growing in a clear cup underneath a pretty bright light. But they're all firmly attached, seem to be healthy. No rot that I can find, so you can see there. Cool. I'm so excited. I have had this guy obviously for a little while, and it did take him a little bit longer to root than some of the other Hoya that I had. However, once he rooted, he went crazy with all of the roots that this little guy put out, and obviously the tendril too is just over the top, but let's see. I'm putting them in little tiny terracotta pots. I mentioned earlier that the dollar store is one of my favorite places to find kind of plant supplies, and this is actually a dollar store plant supply find. They had them in like packs of 2 for I think $1.50, which is a little deceiving, but you know, prices are going up everywhere, so still really cheap though for little terracotta pots. Bigger piece of bark. Cool. And there's nothing wrong with the soil, so or with the water that I just used to rinse off the roots. So I'm just gonna water them in real quick. And I actually have been using lately little cups or bowls to water in. That way all the water that drains out I can just reuse, because I don't like wasting the water, and like even if I only water, you know, my outdoors plants with it, it still is being put to use. So I just don't like that idea. And also when you do that, you're kind of bottom watering and top watering at the same time. So for soil that gets really hydrophobic, it can actually be a really, really great way to rehydrate the soil without, you know, having to worry about it all just spilling out. So next up is this Numeroloides, little Hoya Numeroloides. And this one is also really rooted in there. Trying to tease it out without getting any of the roots damaged. Come on. Oh, he grew into the tip of the boot. It's a little boot shot glass. And I love using little shot glasses to root in. They're just a really great size and they don't take up too much space. But it grew like right into the tip of the boot. That is so funny. Right. And again, just teasing that stratum off. These roots are a little bit more hardy, I feel like, than the Shepherdii. They're not quite as wispy, you see here. And they're a little bit cleaner too. I think the Shepherdii was a little bit more damp for a little bit longer, so it, you know, developed that algae. This guy did not do that as badly though. I don't see a new growth point on here yet, but the roots are healthy and the plant looks good, so I'm just gonna go ahead and pot him up anyways. And this is just my normal potting mix. It has perlite, it has some orchid bark, and it's the orchid bark that has charcoal in it, so that's really great for helping to kind of prevent a little bit of rotting issues at times. And it also has just, you know, whatever soil I can find at my local garden center, which I know some people kind of take issue with. I know there's a lot of people who, you know, prefer a specific brand of soil, but accessibility wise, it's really hard to beat available at Home Depot and Lowe's. All right. I don't know if that's a rock or a piece of bark. I feel like it's a rock. There we go. Super cute little pot up there. I'm gonna water this one in as well. I really do want to give that Shepherdii a little trellis or something, actually. I'll do that in a second. Let me see what I have for trellis. I think this should actually work just about perfectly. Yes, so if you guys saw my reel about making the copper wire trellis for my Hoya calyx, I believe it was, I did actually have two versions of that video, and the first one, the trellis that I made, which is this one, was a little bit small. Turned out to be smaller than really what I needed for that plant. So I did make the second larger version, but saved this one. And it turns out that was a good move because now I can use it for this little guy. And Hoya, when they put out these tendrils like this, they really are looking for something to wrap on, to climb up. And actually, even though they don't have those little like specialized, I believe they're actually specialized aerial roots that do wrap, they still have the ability to climb. This one actually was climbing my bookshelf where it has been living. Was climbing up the side of the bookshelf, funny enough, and had made its way into like little crevices and was pretty determined to make its way up there. So I figured I should probably give it a trellis. That way it's, you know, not quite as likely to do that. There we go. That's actually quite cute. I like that. Much better than just letting it kind of free tendril all over the place. All right, so next let's do this one. This is actually a watermelon dischidia. It's one of two dischidias in my collection. It has those really cool leaves. Actually, let me show you the side. It has those really cool leaves with those pretty striping on them. And this one also has been rooted for a while and in need of a pot up. I just haven't gotten around to it, but today we are going to do it. So here we go. These roots are pretty, thin and fragile, but they are just taking off, my goodness. And I'm okay with a little bit of the stratum remaining on the roots, because I don't really want to break off all of them. And the stratum isn't going to hurt. The soil, it is very aerated, or it's a very airy kind of substrate. So it's not going to cause a problem. It's not going to cause too much moisture retention the way that leaving soil on the roots when switching to pond would. So I'm not worried about that. And I am leaving these little tags on there. They were actually put on there by the person who gifted these cuttings to me. And I haven't gotten around to making my own tags yet for them. And I'm very, very bad at the names of some of the more obscure species of like Hoya, things like that. And because it's so hard to find the names, I know the second I take the tag off, I will never be able to figure out what that Hoya is again. So I've been leaving them be just until I actually get the time to make them their own tags the way I have everyone else. And for those who don't know, Dischidia, which is, again, what this one is, this is a watermelon Dischidia, are very closely related to Hoya. So though they are not the same species, they're very similar and they share a lot of characteristics. But this one is going to be so much happier in a pot than just kind of hanging around in that little shot glass of stratum that it's been in for months. I'm hoping that this will give it the jump it needs to get really, really big. That way I can start filling out the pots by taking cuttings. Something in me just hates taking cuttings of plants that are already so small. So I tend to wait a little bit longer than maybe some people would, just until the plant is actually like a good size, because I feel bad. And I also, don't want to have, pots that are one cutting of a plant. So it is kind of something that I should do at some point, but just waiting on until they're a little bit bigger. All right, so this one, oh, there it is. This is the Hoya CV Nuna. This one's tag did not fit on it because it was a little too small, but I did save the tag. Like I said, it's because I need to have the name somewhere on it. Okay. Perfect. All right. And I think I see a little growth point on this one, so that's good. This one was actually one of the slowest to take off, and I was getting a little bit worried actually about this one before it started showing roots. And the fact that it hadn't put out any new growth was also making me a little concerned, but that little growth point is definitely much more reassuring. It makes me feel better about switching it over now to soil rather than leaving it in the stratum. There we go. I'm also trying to get a lot of these plant chores done now. For those who don't know, I am actually in school. I go half-time and I work full-time. So last week was actually spring break, and I had a nice little break from school even though I was still working. But school starts back up again. My first class is tomorrow. So have a little bit less time available. And especially as we get into like the later parts of the semester, sometimes work gets a little bit more demanding. And I want to make sure that I give everything its proper attention. So getting these guys taken care of now is definitely a good idea. All right, this is the Hoya CV Iris Marie. And this one's leaves are just really unusual to me. They're not those like thick leaves that Hoya have, though they are actually pretty stiff. They're pretty fragile looking and just very thin, which kind of worried me a little bit when I came in because I thought it was just like really dehydrated or like in really bad shape. It's not by any means, like it hasn't gotten more healthy looking or less healthy looking the time that I've had it. In fact, these roots that it's putting out seem pretty happy. Yeah, they look pretty good. And Hoya are really cool insofar as a cutting can actually root from anywhere along the stem. That's something that I actually didn't know until recently. So Hoya can really take off when they're happy and just root like crazy wherever their soil is touching the stem. So this one has roots growing from the entire part pretty much that was in the stratum and that little glass. There we go. And so far, Hoya have adjusted, like the cuttings I have adjusted pretty well from stratum over to soil. So I don't imagine that these guys will have too much trouble. But I'm still gonna keep a really close eye on them just in case. There we go. Oh, looks so cute. I love it. It actually looks a little bit more like a plant in the pot than it did in the little shot glass, but I think it'll do just fine. Water this one in. There we go. I'm gonna let that sit for a second. I think I'm gonna take one last look around just while I have everything out, make sure nothing else needs to be repotted. Okay, so I was able to find one more plant that I think needs to be potted, and that is my Hoya Crimson Queen. I have a cutting that needs to go into the larger mother plants. However, and I just noticed this, I couldn't wait to tell you guys, so I wanted to share now. I found something really exciting. So this Hoya fungi that I had a one leaf cutting out, I've been waiting on growth on for ages, and even as recently as my plant tour, I told you guys, like, I haven't seen anything happen, I'm waiting, but I don't see anything. Well, I just moved my Crimson Queen out of the way, and oh my goodness, look at this. I am so excited. That is a brand new vine. Oh my goodness, I was actually really worried about this plant because it hadn't done anything and the leaf still looked fine, but there was no growth, there was no change, nothing. And now in such a short time, there's a whole new vine, 2 brand new leaves coming out, and then the start of 2 more leaves. That is, sorry, there's a Luna behind me, but this is just incredible, and I'm so excited. What are you doing? But this is just incredible, and I am so happy. And I'm so happy I got to share it with you guys. You guys got to see this in real time. Like I said, I hadn't seen it before today, so one last look at the new Hoya fungi vine, and then I will put her back and let's get that Crimson Queen potted. Okay, so this one is one that was actually propped in moss because it has a little bit of a thicker stem. I felt like moss would be okay for this one. So if you guys saw my last video where I unwrapped a plant from moss, which I will link here for you if I can, it was ridiculous to get all the moss off of all those roots. And it looks like that's probably what we're going to be dealing with again, because I feel the moss not wanting to give way on this one side. Let me see. I did water it actually just before this video, so it should be a little bit easier to get it off. Okay, so I think that's about as good as we're gonna get with getting those roots clean. There is a pretty good root system on here. It has a couple of different points the roots are growing out of. So I think it's gonna be just fine to pot that. Especially since it's going in a pot with another plant. I don't really have to worry about, you know, overwhelming the root system of such a small plant with a larger pot. And this one I know is growing like a weed because it's put out so much new growth for me. Oh my goodness. I don't think I potted this one up in a video with you guys, but I did pot it up really recently, like a couple of months at, you know, most, and it already has a pretty good root system on it, which makes me really happy to see. So let's pop that one back in there. And then you can go on this side. There we go. I think that'll be good. I don't think this vine will continue growing, so it'll probably put out a new growth point somewhere along this vine, which is fine, but I'm gonna try to kind of angle the vines at least. That way they look nice in the pot that they're in for now. Okay. Better, definitely better. And I'm so happy that one's now potted up. And the pot actually looks so much nicer already, just with the new vine in there. Look how cute. I love just the leaves. They're so just, I don't want to say cute again, but they're cute. I love them. And the like little sun stressing on this one, on the newer vine, is just lovely. I love seeing that. So this one is going to be so much happier now that it's actually potted up with its friends. And there's one last thing I want to do before I end this video. So give me 1 second, I'll be right back. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to do is actually move this little serpens cutting over to stratum. It's in perlite right now, and I feel like it's not retaining enough moisture to really keep the serpens happy. And I'm getting a little worried about it. So I am gonna move it over to stratum. And again, a little bit of perlite is not going to hurt it. Perlite also, you know, wicks moisture in much the same way like leca and stratum do. In fact, you can grow completely in perlite, and that's not going to be an issue. You just might have a little bit more fertilizer that needs to be added in. Actually, I think I'm going to put it, like Corky heard something outside, but I think I'm going to put it in this little container here. It's a little bit wider. I'll put leca at the bottom. No, I won't. And that's perlite, it's not leca. But now that I have all of this stratum freed up, I have enough to put in there. There we go. Okay, I think it's gonna work a little bit better in here. The cutting's a little bit long, so I didn't want to put it in like a nice tall glass. I think it'll be probably better in this little container, and it will definitely get more moisture to those roots to allow them to develop better than it did in that tiny little container of perlite. But there we go. It's gonna be so much happier if you're like in that stratum so it can keep rooting. And if you don't know, stratum is actually now my favorite propagation method, I feel like, for Hoya. And I will definitely link it for you down below. It's available on Amazon, as is the pond, so I'll link that as well. And probably the Leca as well, because I had that on Amazon. But that way, if you guys want to use anything I used in today's video, it's going to be down below for you. But I think that's about it. I'm going to go ahead and pop these guys back on their shelf, and then we'll wrap up. Alright guys, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching me give some of my favorite plants a new home. They definitely needed it. And if you enjoy this kind of video, leave me a thumbs up. I would love to have you guys give me a comment down below as well. Let me know what kind of videos you'd like to see me do next. And if there's any plants that you repotted along with me, because I would love for you guys to come along with me on my videos like that. And go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There is one down there, and if you guys wanted to join with Plant Pals, I would be so happy to have you. But that is all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much. Bye.